Alrighty. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this month's MSPs in Conversation. Today, we are going to be talking about leveraging the power of AI to drive efficiencies within your MSP, so automating and scaling within your business and your customers' businesses. So a quick little bit of introduction to Hosted Network. So Hosted Network is a wholesale cloud and telco provider for Aussie MSPs. We started as an MSP in 2003, and 10 years ago, we went 100% channel, so celebrating 10 years this year. As we started as an MSP, we understand why it needs to work, and we understand the pain when it doesn't. So if you're not familiar with MSP, with MSPs, with Hosted Network, please reach out, have a chat. But today, we're not here to talk about us. We are here to talk about leveraging the power of AI within your business and your customers. So very quickly, though, a little bit of housekeeping before I get the panelists to introduce themselves. As always, this is recorded and will be cut up into both video webinar as well as a podcast, so available on YouTube, Vimeo, Spotify, etc. If you guys have any questions that you'd like answered from our panelists today, please feel free to jump right into the chat. We've always loved sort of those questions that come through. We've got a friendly bunch of guys here today. So yeah. Without sort of continuing on too much, Matt, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. And so I'm Matt Dunn. I head up the automation division here at the Missing Link, where we started off a few years ago by automating our own processes, so across our infrastructure and cybersecurity divisions. And then we've expanded this into a client service offering where we either help clients to build their own automation functions or we provide automation as a managed service. So I head up the automation part of the business.
Cool. Thank you. And thank you for joining us. Andrew, welcome.
Yes, g'day. Thank you very much for having me on. So I'm Andrew. I'm the CEO of Y365. We're a Microsoft 365 focused consulting firm. And yeah, at the moment, we are seeing a massive increase in work in that sort of low code, no code AI space, I suppose, particularly in that Microsoft space. So yeah, that's what we do and what we enjoy doing.
Cool, thank you. And Nick, the famous author that you are, maybe introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks very much for having me. My name's Nick Beaugeard, and that is how you pronounce my surname, because most people can't work it out from looking at it. I'm the Chief Software Architect at TribeTech. I do a bunch of things. I spend quite a bit of my life doing that. I'm also Chief Software Architect for a new automation product called World of Workflows. And the rest of my time, I spend my time going around talking to people about AI.
Wonderful. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure you've got some wonderful light bulb moments for everyone on the line. So I guess just to set the tone, so we've all seen a lot of press and conversation around AI. There's a lot of hype, but we're finally starting to see some of the products and startups and integrations that are coming out of that, both for MSPs and our customers. So, you know, because we're starting to have these conversations, it's, I guess, proof that I guess it's the new cloud, right? It's no longer just the new buzzword. We're actually starting to see things come out of it. So today is really an opportunity for myself and the audience to pick the brains of our panelists around where they sort of see those opportunities to, my word of the month at the moment is leverage, how they can leverage AI, you know, both within their business from a top of the line revenue to bottom of the line, you know, profitability, as well as where they're seeing opportunities, how they're tackling it within their businesses, and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, let me just stop my screen share. And there we go. All right, so I clicked the right button, which is always a good thing. So Nick, I'm going to start with you because you've got some great stories I know for this, but Andrew and Matt, please feel free to jump right in. But let's start with some stories. So Nick, what are some of the best examples that you've seen, and feel free to use a personal one, of AI within your business, you know, that you guys run?
Well, I'll start at the beginning. So, you know, ChatGPT was released to market really November of last year, and was, as far as everybody says, and this is stolen from Microsoft presentation, has been the fastest growing technology known to man. It went from 0 to 100 million users in 4 weeks, which is just faster than anything we've seen before until the next tech turns up. And so I was asked to give a presentation about AI at a CompTIA event, and I was there in the shower on a Thursday morning, going, I can't just go to an event by myself. What's that? Oh, all the
where
best
your best ideas come from?
the shower. Yeah, definitely the shower. So I'm definitely in the shower, nothing else. I'm in the shower, and I'm going, oh, what should I do? I know, I'll write a book, right? So the event was a week away, and I went, oh, I'll write a book. I'll take a book with me. That'll work. So I sat down, just got out of the shower, sat down in front of ChatGPT and said, hey, ChatGPT, I'm giving a presentation to CompTIA about ChatGPT. I want to write a book. Can you help? And it said, yes, here's a table of contents. And I went, oh, I quite like that. But can you write chapter 1? And it went, sure. And after a lot of Control-C, Control-Ving, copy-paste for those of you who don't know the keyboard shortcuts, I had really the startings of a book. And so by about lunchtime, we were ready to publish. So I went on to Amazon, and the cool thing isn't that's cool, but what's cool is what happened next. At Thursday lunchtime, I uploaded it to Amazon. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, they said, your Kindle book's ready and your print book's ready. And if you actually search my name on Amazon right now and go to ChatGPT for Executives, you can buy this book right now. But that was Thursday. 5 o'clock, they said they're ready with the print edition. By lunchtime on Sunday, I had physical copies of a book in my hand. And I think, if that's an example of an organization using crazy levels of automation to do something, and I published a book years ago, and from typesetting and printing and making things happen, it was months after you'd released the initial copy. And with Amazon, if I find something wrong, I can go change it online, and within 12 hours, everything's been updated and people are buying new copies of the book. So that's the level of automation some of the big end of town are achieving. But for us, what happened after that was I told a bunch of people about it. A bunch of people bought it. It was a business book. It's not hard to hit #1 in the bestsellers list. I think you've got to sell about 900 copies. I did 10 times that with this book. It was ridiculous. It flew off the shelves. Barnes & Noble now syndicate it in the US. It's crazy. But what everybody thinks now is I know loads about AI because I wrote a book on it.
That's why you're here, aren't you?
Exactly. So I've been asked to speak here. I'm going to Queenstown next week. I'm speaking in Auckland. I'm doing events with HPE and all sorts of people. Loads are happening. For our business, it's been brilliant. It's been a cracking marketing tool. But that's some of the things you can do with a copy of ChatGPT, understanding how automation works and making that happen.
That's a crazy story. And I was actually with Nick the night that he wrote that book, and so he was sharing to come to our event, and within the next day it was on Amazon, and it was I didn't realize that level of automation even existed, right? When you're thinking it's not just within a process, that's to a physical environment, which is crazy. So if that's the upper end of town, I'm crazy to see where we're going to go to. That hype, and that's what I sort of said at the beginning. This concept of AI and this automation level has really leveled up very, very quickly. And yeah. So I guess Andrew, Matt, from your side, what have you seen within as best examples within your customers or whatnot? Any crazy war stories to set the tone?
Andrew, you fire away.
Yeah, no worries. I'll jump in here. Yeah, so I mean, look, we are seeing a lot. I mean, I suppose to set the scene, firstly, I think you're absolutely right, Nick. The ChatGPT hype has just been absolutely incredible, and the ramp up to that has been phenomenal. And I think what we're seeing in the sort of business side of things is a lot of businesses now trying to go, well, okay, how can I leverage this technology and get the most out of it to improve the efficiencies or deliver value for my business? And the answer to that question is different for a lot of different businesses. And I think what we're sort of seeing is a real focus on this language processing component of it, but there are actually other facets of the GPT architecture. And what we're really particularly excited about is the Microsoft Copilot stuff that does back end off of that GPT large language model. But yeah, so we're seeing a lot of customers asking the questions. We're currently working with a customer at the moment, actually, in the customer service space. And for them, customer service queries are, again, bread and butter stuff for large language models, because really what we're trying to do is ascertain what information does the customer need and how can we respond to that in sort of a friendly and helpful fashion and develop a little bit of a personality. And large language models are absolutely fantastic for that. But what it's also really good at is extracting information. So this particular customer is dealing with processing of orders. So it's not quite as automated as your book, Nick, in terms of sending out the physical goods automatically and all of that kind of thing. But we're sort of at the point where they've got a maybe legacy is the wrong word, like a traditional ERP and stock management system, and that it does have some semblance of an API, but by connecting that up to an AI system, we're actually able to grab orders as text. Somebody emails in and says, I want 3 of this thing and 5 of that thing, and and the system can actually parse that and work out what they want, and then feed that into the order system and then process through there. So that's sort of an example of the type of thing that we are seeing, where really what we're trying to do is interconnect systems that we just weren't able to easily connect in the past. And so, AI has really allowed us to accelerate that development as well. So you talk about leveraging. I think we could have built an integration for this particular task without AI, but it just would have taken a lot longer and it would have been a lot more inflexible. Now with AI, we've got the ability to analyze text, analyze language a lot more efficiently and quickly, and get that integration built really, really fast, which is really exciting.
Cool. Thank you, Matt. What do you got? What do you think?
Yeah, so to Nick's point about where the story started. So my story started in Microsoft Teams, actually, so our head of cybersecurity posted an article on ChatGPT and said, you have got to check this out. So started playing with it, and then it turned into training for all the company's end users. Now, in terms of how the end users are using it, so generally sort of things like writing meeting agendas, making communications more clear and succinct. But in IT, so code development, I don't know of a developer who isn't using it, as it significantly speeds up the process of writing code and debugging it. Documentation, no one likes doing that, so it does a great job of that. Troubleshooting, so you're not needing to go to different message boards to find your answers. It does a better job of consolidating what's on the internet and bringing that back. And also policy review and development. So the thing about policies is that they are written by experts, and quite often the experts will use jargon, and that won't be understandable to an end user, for example. So making a policy clear and being able to refine your own policy. So you can even put information in it and say, how could this be better, as opposed to rewrite it. But then across the different parts of the business, so HR, writing job ads, performance management, marketing. So they're probably the ones in terms of the productivity boost. They get the highest level of that in marketing, in their keyword ideas, content outline generation, to Nick's point about punch out a table of contents and then write the first draft of each of the chapters. Similar with content outline generation. And I asked our content developer, what, in terms of productivity, what do you reckon percentage-wise this is given you in terms of a boost? And she reckoned it was around 300%. And that was the highest sort of percentage I'd heard of any of the different parts of the business. And I asked, where do you think that the most time is actually saved? And she said, well, interestingly, it's actually when you're sitting there with a blank piece of paper and you're needing ideas. So you might have some keywords and you're thinking of ideas of what could be a compelling topic. And it was more a case of just write me 100 topics, headlines. And then look, 95 of them might be rot, but there are going to be 5 in there that you're like, now I'm into the next step of the process. So that's where they were getting the benefits. And yeah, and then, so similarly to our, I remember I said automation, we started using it ourselves and then offering it to clients. We actually train clients now in using ChatGPT, because there are a couple of really important things to know about the data risks. I'm sure we're going to come to risks later, but knowing how to use it, where your data goes, what switches to switch off so that your data doesn't go into the model, for example. And yeah, generally using it across the business. And quite interestingly, Andrew mentioned Copilot there. So the Copilot for Power Automate to develop workflows with just natural language, it's bonkers how much faster. That's still in preview, but it's bonkers how fast that will speed up coding.
It's funny you say the coding, because we've got a full dev team in house, or our DevOps team, and they use it quite heavily, built into their IDE and those sort of things. So it's the debugging piece of it. And I'm a network engineer by trade, and we've found that the network configuration, our CLI components, our scripting, as even that bridging that gap has been very, very helpful when we want to sort of deploy something new, or it's like, hey, this is Cisco, what is it going to equal in, say, a FortiGate or whatever it might be, and voila, there's a config.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things I think we've just skirted on the edge on that I wanted people who are listening to understand. First of all, I've been watching the comments and everyone's talking about, will we have an AI Nick? Well, I don't know if you use the new Teams, but the new Teams has just come out with avatars, and those avatars are drivable using an API. ChatGPT has a Whisper API, which takes voice and turns it into text. You can then use ChatGPT functions to say what the avatar should do. And in fact, in my meeting this morning, they had a virtual Nick, which was my voice, but the avatar was acting out what I do for another reason. But I'll go beyond that. I don't know if any of you have played with what used to be called Code Interpreter or Advanced Data Analytics in ChatGPT. It was funny. People say to me a lot, what is the first job you think will be got rid of by AI? And I've always said, glibly, it's not AI that will get rid of your job. It's someone else with AI that will get rid of your job if you're not doing it. However, I've been playing with advanced data analytics. I do a lot of work with accountants and financial professionals. And you can take a set of data in CSV or Excel, you can throw it at this tool and you can say, analyze this. And I'll use a story. I was at a SMBIT meeting that they have chapters all around the country. If you're not a member, you should probably join. And I was there at the organization, and there was someone from one of the vendors, and I won't say which one. He said, Nick, I've got to write my quarterly business report. My QBR, can you help me out? And I said, well, give me the last 3 months sales data. He gave me the data. I put it into advanced data analytics. I went, write the QBR for this organization. And it wrote the entire report for him with all the customers he should focus on, which ones have sold well, which distributors were good, which products they should look at. And this thing is insanely good. So if you haven't paid you $20 a month to OpenAI, which is a tax on being efficient, and you haven't played with advanced data analytics, you really have to. The thing is super cool.
I think just to sort of expand on that, Nick, that sounds like a really, really fantastic use case for the GPT. And I think what it boils down to is creating a better interface and a better relationship with our systems and our data. And I think that's typically been a point of contention, and I suppose a point where a lot of IT professionals live their lives in this gray area between the humans and the technology. And I think that is going to be an area where GPT is going to excel, because things like, data is highly structured, very easy to reason about for a computer. When we're talking about AI, we're talking about programming languages, again, very well-defined set of rules that they have to follow, and set of outcomes that the user is after. And so bridging that gap, I think, is really what has sort of revolutionized it. GPT understands what we're saying, and the language that we use, and how to translate that into those really structured and regimented formats.
Yeah,
actually,
God,
yep,
sorry,
go,
Ben, you go. Andrew got me started, right? He's an Office 365 consultant, and I was just playing with a bit of tech earlier this week. OpenAI have released an open source plugin which is used for vector databases indexing non-structured data, which means nothing to anyone because nobody wants to build a vector database. But if you've got Office 365 and you're using SharePoint Online, you actually have one. Microsoft Search is actually a vector database. And although this is in beta, you can plug that into ChatGPT now. So ChatGPT doesn't see your data, but it's able to call the vector database and get the right data out of all of your documents and spreadsheets and PDFs and TIFFs and anything you've got that can be indexed in SharePoint, and return that back to you, which totally changes that human computer interface for staff in an organization, which again is crazy exciting.
So that's that's a large deployment. Where are you seeing the smaller, sort of the easier wins, guys, within businesses? Matt, you touched on a few around.
That's an easy win, Ben. That's anybody who's got their documents in SharePoint.
True. Okay, so let me rephrase the question. Thank you for the challenge. I appreciate it. So if we're thinking about, I'm a tech, right? And a lot of the guys on the call will have a tech background. We used sort of the various AIs around our communication, improving, streamlining, making sure we haven't missed things. What are some of the approaches that our MSPs can use within their business that you've seen successful around not just sort of documentation, those sort of things? Is there something that they could walk away today and implement in addition to what Nick is saying?
I think a clarity of communications. So being able to put in something there that's going to make your communications more succinct. I find that any email that I have that goes past a paragraph, if you put it in there and say, make this clearer and more succinct, it does a really good job of hitting the mark with your audience as far as being able to understand the information. Now, particularly in a technical role where you're giving technical advice, being able to put it and you can say, explain this at the level of a high school graduate, or so that it can put it in simpler terms so that the end users get more value from the information that you're giving to them, even though it contains the same advice, but it's potentially in their language that they can reconcile with. I'd say is a quick win.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good one. Sorry, Ben.
No, please just cut me off. I love
it. Excellent. No, I was just going to say, I think to expand upon that, I think Matt's absolutely correct. I think communication is sort of the golden goose at the moment, I suppose, of the GPT capability. But I think something that we have had the capability to do for a little while, but it's been sort of less obvious how to do it, I suppose. And again, you can sort of do this with GPT, I think, is really managing priorities and actually detecting sentiment. So, we have been able to pass, blocks of text into APIs, particularly, obviously, living in the Microsoft world, we're dealing with Azure Cognitive Services, but we have had the capability to pass data into that. But, it requires an IT person to build something, whereas GPT, anybody can ask it, hey, what is the sentiment of this enormous paragraph? And so that's really powerful when you're dealing with, say, help desk requests, because you probably want to know pretty early on if somebody's sending a really tersely worded help desk request where they're clearly annoyed and might need some really upfront attention now. Having those sort of early warning signs, or having those triage processes in to go, hey, this one needs to go straight up to level 2 because there's something going on there. And on that note too, being able to determine what is required here. Is this likely to be a problem that GPT can answer itself? Is it going to be a problem that needs to go to a level 1 set of team or a level 2 set of team, or does this one go straight to the network engineers? So I think being able to extract those key pieces of information and categorize and triage based on that information is a really quick, easy win that we can get as well.
Is that from an automation perspective, or is that sort of still more of a swivel chair using the traditional ChatGPT tool? I'm calling it traditional.
I suppose it depends on how tech savvy you are and how far you want to go with it. So, I mean, and I suppose I don't want to front run the topic of security and sort of being aware of that, because I imagine that's something we have to discuss. But I think there's, that aside, you can absolutely hook up to APIs and things like that. So if you are reasonably tech savvy, or even using the tooling that Nick talked about, that's in beta, the workflow generator tools available for Power Automate and things like that, you can actually do most of that reasonably quickly, at least in a test environment yourself. But again, there's the whole security and privacy and confidentiality discussion as well, that is a component of all those type of automations. But
well, let's jump into that in a second, but I will sort of throw a challenge to everyone else on the call. If anyone knows of any interesting tools or whatnot, or that they'd like to share with the audience, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm sure there's plenty of good valuable content that you guys are already aware of. But let's jump into that sort of that risk, that privacy piece of it. We saw that the code sample of who was it, IBM or someone that Sam, yeah, and that's a big risk, right? What do we need to consider if we're going to be putting personally identifiable information or our IP into these tools? I know that there is an enterprise version coming of ChatGPT. How can we mitigate that? Has anyone got any guidance on that?
Yeah, you have seen that Italy banned the use of ChatGPT as an entire country not that long ago, and that was because they were worried about their citizens not being aware of what information that they were putting into the model. So with ChatGPT, the biggest risk is sensitive data going into the model. So that Samsung example that you spoke about, if there's a switch that OpenAI introduced in response to Italy's banning of it, because they didn't want the rest of Europe opting out of their new handy tool. And there's a switch in your data settings where you can switch that off, and that switches off both the data going into the model, but also your chat history. Because the simpler, I guess, way of exposing data is that if your user accounts are being hacked, and say your users are using their work email address and a weak password, then their chat history would be available to the hacker, and they could associate that data with your company because they've got the email address. So you can mitigate these by going into your settings, switch off chat history, and opting out of your data going into the model. And the other risk is that ChatGPT doesn't know when it's wrong. It's simply giving you the most statistically correct answer. So it's kind of like a really smart grad that won't tell you when they're wrong. It doesn't know when it's wrong. So it may be inaccurate. So, and the data is only up until the end of 2021. So that's something to bear in mind, that the model is limited. And I guess lastly is that it's not only the good guys who get a boost. Hackers are using it to write malicious code or craft more convincing phishing emails. So yeah, that's I think from my perspective what the biggest risks are. I don't know if you've ever heard the term picnic in the IT context, but it's very relevant for ChatGPT, which is problem in chair, not in computer.
Yeah,
we
use PBCAC, problem between the back of the chair and the keyboard, but very similar. So I'll just expand on that a little bit, because there's been a change to the ChatGPT terms and conditions on Monday. So one of the things they introduced after the Italy ban, and Italy hasn't banned it anymore, that's been undone. One of the things they introduced after that is there's an additional set of terms and conditions you can sign called the data processing addendum. And that actually enforces by contract as well as technologically what happens with your data. They also say if you're only using the API, so you're not using the ChatGPT interface, you're using the API, none of that data is used to train models or gets stored for any length of time at all, which is very similar. Well, actually, it gets really interesting. I'll probably be contentious here when you're talking with Microsoft and they go, you should use Azure OpenAI because it's more secure, blah, blah, blah. Well, that is only API. So are they different? I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea. But I think the other thing we missed there, as well as hallucinations, it getting things wrong. And I describe that like the guy at trivia who always is convinced he's right for every answer and is wrong on almost all of them. ChatGPT is good at being that person, but it's the bias in the model. If you think ChatGPT has been trained on what we call the corpus of human knowledge, the corpus of human knowledge is really biased. If you ask, I think they've fixed this now, but if you used to ask ChatGPT to write a story about a cook, you get a woman in a kitchen. And if you ask it to write a story about a chef, you get a man in a professional kitchen. That's because of our own biases in our own writing that have been used to train the model as it goes forward. So hallucinations, bias, and then reading the terms and conditions and getting advice as to whether you can do stuff with it or not.
And we've seen similar things. Even I mentioned the network engineering example internally. We've actually seen, just it outrightly getting it wrong, but presenting it in a way that is accurate. So there's also that risk as well. Sort of make sure you don't just copy and paste entirely with what you're doing. Right, would be a customer service or whatnot. It might accidentally slip in something that's wrong. I think Matt, you touched earlier on sort of that training piece of it, and I think that enablement is also very important of your team. I've actually sent a message internally to go, you know what, we should probably do some more enablement training to make sure people are using it correctly.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's the like most widespread productivity tool that has been rolled out to humanity with zero training. So we can't blame users for not knowing where their data goes when it's so instantly useful and easy, easy for them to put their information in. So it's going to be, the issue is going to be with the grad that just joined who didn't know that they were pasting your proprietary code in, or like with that the lawyer example where they in a New York lawyer got their case written for them by ChatGPT, and the first two links were to real cases that served as precedents, but the last two were completely made up, and that lawyer's in a lot of trouble now.
Wow, interesting.
In fact, ChatGPT's T's and C's say you cannot give legal advice and you cannot give financial advice through this.
But you can ask it to act as a lawyer.
And then it will say guardrails will come up and it say I shouldn't, but that's an ethical thing, right? The thing when I'm talking to people is whatever it creates, a human should go over it first before sending it off to someone else. That's a really important step in the process.
Guys, shifting, hopefully we've covered risk, but if anyone's got any other questions around risk and whatnot, feel free to drop that in the chat and we can address that. But I'd like to sort of shift to, we've talked a couple of ideas around sort of revenue generation and focusing on the opportunity of AI. So sort of expanding on that, straight out, where do you see the biggest opportunity of AI for MSPs?
I think in terms of like we're all short on skills, like there's a market shortage for skills. So I think the opportunity to be able to do more with what you currently have, and also if your people are being driven into the ground, working longer hours to try and make up for the other people that you haven't been able to hire to sort of manage the demand of requests, it means that like that work-life balance, and maybe even like wild, I know, but the 4-day work week. So imagine you skilled up in the use of generative AI and everyone was able to be that much more productive that they could work a 4-day week and still get paid the same salary. You're going to be a place that hangs on to your people because they're able to be more productive with tools like this. And so it's the more mundane work that tends to get taken care of as a result of it. So I think in terms of the people aspect, you might have seen the intergenerational report recently about what does Australia look like in 30 years' time? And we're short on people, which means we need to be more productive, which seems like, and I was looking at the report thinking, oh, Shane, those poor old people. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, 30 years' time, that's me. So it's like, you take care of yourself and help to make the workforce more productive so that we are able to contribute to the economy.
Okay, Andrew, what do you see as I guess the primary opportunity at the moment for MSPs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Matt's really outlined a lot of that internal opportunity in terms of really getting more efficient. And I think that's always going to be the goal of the businesses, of a business, I suppose, is to be as efficient at what we do as we possibly can. I think that the AI systems that we've got access to now can certainly help us by responding to simple queries and providing information much more intelligently. Triaging and management of requests, as I said before, I think is a really big area that we can really leverage this. But I also think there's sort of opportunities for MSPs to become more involved in that process automation space. I mean, it's been something that we've really focused on and really learned the tools in the Microsoft space. But, to a point, some of that is going to become a little bit less relevant now because for the simpler tasks, the AIs can build those workflows for you. They can build those power apps for you. And so it sort of starts to put the tools, democratize, I suppose, access to the tools. And it means you don't have to have a dev team to manage that. You don't have to have necessarily workflow specialists doing that stuff. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunities there that are definitely going to eat into parts of, where we see ourselves as experts, I suppose. And I think that is an opportunity as well. There's an opportunity to just do more and build more in that space without getting bogged down in the code and the integrations and all of the stuff that GPT is really good at now and we don't have to worry about.
Nick, what are you seeing?
So I'll add a couple of things to that. I think Andrew's got a really good point, but fools rush in a little bit with this. For those of us, I'm older than all of you, right? So I'm in that old demographic. But I remember the days of Lotus Notes where anybody and their brother could go and write a mission critical application. And I remember moving customers off Lotus Notes where they went, oh, we've got 9,400 mission critical applications written in Notes. What do we do with them? So we need to be careful we don't get that kind of app spread. We need to manage that a little bit. But I think the thing is for an MSP, and I think anything that's ripe for automation with AI is anytime you're copying something from one window and putting it into another, whether that's creating a new user from a help desk ticket, creating a billing entry from a PDF from a domain provider, all of that can be automated with some automation tools like Power Automate or what workflows that we build, and that's why we build it, and some AI mixed in the middle. And if you can do that for your business, and I would say IT businesses are slightly easier to do it for than other businesses, then you've got a real opportunity to offer that to your customers. And for MSPs, that's moving you up the value chain away from what a lot of people are doing, which is routers, switches, desktops, laptops, and Office 365, into actually going, we're not just a cost, we're improving our customers' businesses. And I think that's the really exciting way forward. And I would say, if you're not thinking of doing that, then there's probably an awful lot of your competitors that are.
Yeah, going deeper with customers, right? Rather than just that sort of the traditional means. We've actually had Fuzzy add a comment in here, which is, he's usually as a panelist. So as an attendee, it's always interesting him being on the other side. But he sort of said, I am all for AI to be clear, but we are not also causing a lot of MSPs and businesses an issue with shadow IT. I always love that term, shadow IT. Sounds so dark and mysterious. But what do you guys see that's causing more issues? So the businesses that have just jumped in, maybe not without, your guidance, jumped right in at the deep end, have they caused themselves issues that they hadn't thought about for, you guys as MSPs?
I think it's similar as the cloud. We had a lot of customers that got really excited about cloud products and ended up with their data strewn everywhere. And I think, we are likely to see some of that shadow IT stuff. But what I would sort of say to counter that, I suppose, from my perspective, is that it just changes the focus for the MSP and where we should really be putting our effort. So as a bit of an example, when COVID hit, sort of accelerated the remote work trend, and all of a sudden we had to change. Well, it wasn't really all of a sudden, I suppose, but in an accelerated time frame, we had to change from focusing on networks and firewalls and servers and all that sort of stuff to focusing on endpoints, and it really pushes the protection out to that endpoint device and management there. And I think we're sort of seeing the same thing here. It's going to be less about the database that it's in. It's going to be less about the tool that it's in, or the tool that's, the workflow integrations. And I think we're going to see more of a focus on our data and our information. How are we storing each row? What permissions are we looking at, and how are we all allowed to interact with that? The tools that go on top of that, I think are all there to enhance productivity, as long as the organization and the IT team within that organization or their MSP are really in control of where that data is stored. I think there's a lot of benefit, to come out of that.
I think that's interesting if like Nick said, that you can go deep with the customer. Whereas if you're just skirting around the edges and you don't have that visibility, and all of a sudden you kind of get that, oh, hey, we've done this. I think every MSP on here is, they've got a customer that just randomly signed a contract for something, and then it's the MSP's problem, right? Oh, cool, we've got to go do this. Do you see that as an issue? Maybe Matt, Nick, or Andrew?
I think, Ben, I think one of the things that, in my view, always has been like this is, if you have a shadow IT problem, then as an IT provider, you're not delivering what the business needs. So it's not that the business has their priorities wrong. I think you have your priorities wrong. I'm being a bit contentious there and a bit direct, but you do that on webinars, right? I think if areas of the business are going out and whacking their credit card on products and solutions, technology products and solutions, then you need to look at why aren't we meeting the needs of the business? And you need to get closer to those businesses to understand it. Shadow IT might be an IT management issue, but I think it's an IT management issue delivered by a perceived lack of delivery or performance or provision of services that the business needs. So you need to have a really cold, hard look rather than just go, it's shadow IT, users are bad. I don't think that's the right answer.
I think you just turned shadow IT into an opportunity, Nick. There you go, guys. There's a pipeline generation tactic right there. If you've got a shadow IT problem, it's now an opportunity. Matt, you look like you're about to say something. Oh.
No. Yeah. So as far as I guess you could like turn it also into an opportunity. Shadow IT users who use generative AI could do what they're doing anyway in a more considered way. So if they knew about how to ask the question about what are the risks of using this, or compare this to other software that you're thinking about, and they might make more informed decisions. If they weren't going to consult IT anyway, at least they're getting another opinion on what they're doing.
Yeah, and I also think there's a communication opportunity here as well. So I think, Nick, your statement about this being an IT problem, I don't think is wrong at all. I think that's absolutely correct. I also think there's an element of communication here as well, though. It's not necessarily always that IT is not providing the service that this particular component of the business requires. It might just be that they're not aware that they can provide that service, or that the communication breakdown's there. And so to flip that down into an opportunity as well, we've already talked about the benefits of using AI to help with communication with our customers. I think that's a really massive opportunity to make sure we are keeping consistent, regular, high quality communication channels open with our customers, and providing them with the really critical information they need to help mitigate some of that shadow IT problem.
If those of you that do QBRs, maybe even adding in, sort of understanding that shadow IT, but also this opportunity side of it as well, going deeper, asking those questions. I like to say to my team, at Host Network, we're a bit tongue in cheek, but ask the fucking question, right? Actually get in front of them and go, hey, what are you doing with this? Why are you doing this? Okay, cool. All right, don't attack it, but actually just challenge it. Go deeper so that you can actually understand that. And I think that's the biggest opportunity. It's always easier to, drive more revenue from existing customers than it is to bring in new ones. Way easier. So yeah, and maybe even AI is an opportunity for you to drive those QBRs as well, right? streamline that internally, that operational, summarize, tickets and do that analysis as well. Got me thinking now. Well, my Paul Luke, our CEO, is on the call. He's going to have a long list after this. I'll tell you what. Guys, I guess, from an opportunity perspective, we've talked a little bit about MSPs, but focusing on the customers, so the guys, on the call can understand which clients might be focusing on this more. Are there particular industries that you've seen that are jumping on the AI automation bandwagon more than others? That if they've got them on their books, that they should be jumping in and having those conversations with?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's some the risk averse. So I guess in the legal sector, it's a hesitation between ban it all versus wait for something that's more governed, like a ChatGPT for Enterprise or Microsoft Copilot, or it will more easy to govern rather. But I think what we're seeing in terms of industries is those that have the combination of creativity, analysis, and problem solving. So it'll be ones like so media and entertainment, education for sure. Like it's definitely an opportunity and a threat. Like if you think about education, the way that it is traditionally served up, it's here is the curriculum delivered at a pace, and if you're super smart, you might get bored, and if you're not so smart, you might get left behind. Whereas if you've got AI that's incorporated into it, has the whole curriculum in it. It means that they can learn at the pace that suits them, which means that everyone is going to learn better. There's a few teething issues that they're going to have to work out, like how do you test the students, or because the traditional write an essay, it doesn't really work anymore. So they're talking already about more oral examinations and actually writing, getting the old pen out and having written supervised examinations. So they've got a lot to work through, but education and then management consulting, and then not necessarily of the creativity, but more on the analysis side, financial services are taking this up in a big way. So they're very interested in the likes of, say, the Azure OpenAI connector, where you're actually connecting it to their data sources, and less than the interface, or the ChatGPT type interfaces.
Yeah, I would say on top of that, in education, I'll just plug my other book, ChatGPT for Education, which you can find out all about that in, if you'd like to. It's available on Amazon. It's cheap too. It's only $9 a copy.
Education, reinforcing that as well. My wife works in the education sector, and I know that there's a lot of teachers that are developing, lesson plans. Hey, I need a lesson plan on this because I'm, filling in. And they need to tie into these curriculum links. So it's speeding up that side of it. But I mean, there's that risk of that bias, like you sort of said before as well, right? So interesting. I don't know if that's, well, it's probably not being addressed in that sense. Nick, you also mentioned that, both of you have mentioned, well, Matt, you just mentioned financial, but Nick, you mentioned that earlier as well, that your background is in sort of financial. Would you mind touching on a little bit of where you're seeing that as an opportunity?
It's amazing. I think I was seeing a lot. I do a lot with accountants, so I'm off working with the Audit Association of Australia, the Insolvency Restructuring and Turnaround Association. I like them because their annual conference is in Queenstown, but also doing a bunch of presentations for Chartered Accountants ANZ. And I think the professional bodies are really struggling with the ethics around it, and they struggle with ethics around everything. So that's fascinating. But demonstrating to accountants, things that I think the issue professional services have is they're very used to billing by time. And these are things which save time. And there's this big conflict in their mind about, how do I ethically bill a client when I've now got a tool saving me time? And I think that's a struggle across the board. And secondly, if I get ChatGPT to do something, how do I know the results are accurate or it's not leading them somewhere? And the understanding that as an organization, you need to actually go and deliver advice to your customer, and it's the individual who gives the advice, not the technology, so they can't rely on that. There's a whole bunch of ethical minefields, yet there's a million tons of savings. And I've got a story, and I'll try and be brief because I know we're limited for time, but I was at an accounting conference, and somebody got on stage and said and this was like 3 years ago, the biggest technological advance for accountants in the history of accounting has been the invention of laptops that run 2 screens. So you can see one thing and copy it to the other app. Right? That he was being serious. And yeah, when you look at that and you see what you can now do with AI, you understand why it can have just such a big effect in that industry. So anything financial services is as Matt said, taking this up in a huge way. But I say anything professional services it applies for. But we're now seeing it in manufacturing and across the board. It's a horizontal solution that can apply almost anywhere.
Your example of Amazon earlier is, that's very large sort of manufacturer kind of thing. Yeah, interesting. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the most interesting thing about particularly ChatGPT and more broadly AI is that they are quite a democratizing technology. I think we're seeing it across the board everywhere. We're sort of seeing that traditionally more risk-averse customers are still risk-averse, but they're being brought in. It's almost a little bit like the tail wagging the dog in some cases where they're finding out that staff are actually using this and they didn't realize it. So the risk-averse managers are going, oh, well, hang on, if we are already getting benefit out of it, we may as well start to adopt it on a larger scale. But typically our customers that are already like to stay on the cutting edge of tech are right into it. So it's sort of interesting to hear the perspective from Matt and Nick, because we've sort of seen a pretty broad across the board approach at the moment. We don't seem to have that many industries specifically. It's more about the individual customer and whether or not they're
Well, let me flip the question on its head. Do you have any industries that are very adverse to it?
We don't have any industries that are very adverse. We have customers that are very adverse to it, and I think that's the thing. Everybody reads a lot of emails, writes a lot of emails. A lot of industries write a lot of reports and do a lot of that sort of big data, processing of lots of text, I suppose, and from a human perspective. And I think all of those things can be done or assisted by GPT. It just depends whether or not that's endorsed by the business or not.
Okay, so for the businesses that are if you've got MSP clients that aren't, and we touched on the time thing. I think Nick said your financial services, they're sort of billing their time. Thank goodness MSPs have moved to an MSP model where they're not billing time, for those of you that aren't Breakflix, because that's straight to your bottom line, right? Or you don't have that worry at all. But focusing on those customers that might be more adverse to it, how do you address that? Is there an approach that you guys have got to sort of explain the benefits?
We're actually just starting a program in conjunction with NextDC, because one of the big risk-averse things is there aren't any real hosted AI platforms in Australia. So even if you use Azure, you're using Azure in the US to do large language model stuff. So we're doing some work with NextDC on hosting some expensive GPUs and HPE kit to do large language model processing using the Llama models, which come from Meta. Those models in certain areas perform just as well as some of the GPT models, but stay within your own environment. So work on your own data in your own environment. Nothing goes out to the cloud. That type of thing, when you make that work, and wait 18 months, if order a GPU now, wait 18 months, you'll have one. But when you do that type of stuff, that for a lot of organizations who have regulatory compliance rules, so anybody in law enforcement or in investigations or in significant compliance, lots of government don't want data going outside the territory. And you have to if you're using those models at the moment. There are options, and we're just starting those where we're running those up in local data centers as hosted environments where they can actually run it effectively on premises. That's, I think, as with everything, cloud's now hybrid. AI is going to be hybrid as well, and those models you can download and use are pretty good now, especially if you fine tune them around your use case.
I think just to sort of expand on that as well, I think trust is a really important sort of word in this AI discussion. I think AI is such a complicated beast of a technology, and it's really amazing that the things that it can do, but it is really amazing the things that it can achieve. But we really have to trust in the companies that they're doing the right thing. And so I think the customers that are not wanting to engage with AI on an organizational level, or have certain reservations or legislative requirements, as you sort of touched on there, Nick, I think we're going to have to build that trust in these AI systems, because they are different, they are new, and they are a whole different operating model to a traditional sort of IT system. So I think that the best approach there is really, as you said earlier, Ben, to get in there deep with your customers and really understand what they are trying to achieve. And then whilst you're working through these processes, you can identify the processes that are most likely to be impacted by AI in a positive way. And a lot of the time, you don't need confidential data to help, with these processes. It can be something small to start with and really start to build that trust up and go from there. But yeah, I think trust is something that takes a little bit of time to establish for those type of customers.
I was going to add to that you know, Nick, you've mentioned the opportunity going deep. But we've also talked a little bit around the resourcing that you know, I think we all know we're having a challenging time here in Australia getting staff. If you identify opportunities, I'd also encourage those on the line to you know, partner with partners. You know, going back to what you said, Andrew, trust elements. I think there's an opportunity there for everyone. But if you're not specializing in it, to identify those as well. Just a little bit of tidbit: we don't do AI, so I'm not spooking anyone. But I just think it is an opportunity that I do see that people may lose out. They may lose clients as other people come along that can do these things better. And you know, it's one of those. IT is a great industry that you have to keep learning. Right, it's constantly challenging. It's constantly evolving. And I do think that AI is one of those areas. Whether you're going as detailed as what Nick is, I think you at the very least, you know, you need to have a good understanding of, so you can have those business conversations. So with that in mind, because I am being told that, you know, that we've only got 9 minutes left, like to sort of get your magical, you know, idea of where this is all going, right? Maybe someone can ask the AI and tell us what that it thinks, statistically speaking. But where do you think we're headed? This has evolved very quickly. I remember when the first time I was writing books for my daughter with, you know, all family members and things like that, and it was blowing my mind, absolutely blowing my mind, a bit like VR did. But where do you guys think that this is heading in a year, maybe 2 years?
I think it'll just be ubiquitous. It'll be part of everything that we do, and it won't. The novelty will wear off, and it'll be like the internet or like mobile. I think it has like a similar level of impact in that it's just going to be something that everyone uses, and yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Nick, you mentioned law enforcement before. If you say Minority Report, I'm leaving.
Well, actually, if you read the terms and conditions for ChatGPT, you're actually not allowed to predict crime with it, just so you know.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the terms. But there's a couple of things. And one of the big things which is going to shift this is going to be regulation. So if you're in New South Wales today, the New South Wales government has opened for submissions on their AI platform. That's open till the 20th of October. So if you want to say, at least on how government sees it, that's something we should do. So there's going to be a whole heap of regulation appear. Some of that will be good, some of that will be bad. That's going to change where we are. I think Matt's right. It's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere. But I think we're also going to see what we saw when we shifted to cloud and what we saw when we shifted to distributed computing from mainframe and mid-range, is that a whole bunch of household names in the tech industry are just going to disappear. And there's going to be a whole bunch of new ones. And we see that every time that, and I'm living through my third big change like this. Every time there's a big change like this, you see quite a significant shift. Who'd have thought 20 years ago that AWS would be a thing, right? So there's, or even Google, to be honest with you. But there's those shifts happen. So I think we'll see that happening again, which makes it a fascinating time at the moment to go make lots of money because it's new and not a lot of people know how to do it. Again, in a few years' time, it will be ubiquitous, it will be regulated, it will be very different.
So the opportunity is now.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, any thoughts?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think you know, I think Matt and Nick have summarized it really nicely. I think the only thing I would add is that I think it's going to raise the baseline a little bit. So the sort of example that I'm totally stealing this from a podcast, and I can't remember who it was talking about it, but somebody was talking about the use of AI in education, and they were sort of saying that like, it just raises the baseline. It means that you have to be at least as good as the AI because everyone has access to this tool and everyone can make it write an essay. And so it just raises that baseline and says, right, here's the tool. If you can't do something as good as this, then, you know, that is that baseline. And I think we're going to see that across the board in a lot of things. I also sort of wonder, you know, maybe it's a little bit more philosophical than technical, but I do wonder whether it's going to change the way that we communicate. I think that emails are out of control. I think Teams messages are out of control. I think that, you know, we already have lots of strategies in place to try and sort of triage the way that we interact with each other. And I wonder whether AI is fundamentally going to change that because it will really be my AI talking to your AI rather than you and I having a conversation unless we pick up the phone. And in some aspects, that wouldn't necessarily be such a bad thing. In other ways, it may not be so good. I don't know. So I really wonder about that, but I don't think there's any question that this is going to be a ubiquitous piece of technology. I think it's really going to raise that baseline, and it's going to give people a lot of opportunity, which is really, really cool.
Cool. Guys, we're at 5 minutes time. So final question. What are 2 things from each of you that the audience should think about and go and do as soon as they leave this webinar? Or if they're hearing this as a podcast, I'll let you guys think about that in a second, for a second or so.
If you aren't already using it extensively, a really simple thing to do is set ChatGPT as your homepage. And what that does is it means that you don't fall into the trap that many do, which is that they use it for about 5 days and then kind of forget that it's there and remember sporadically. But if you've got it as your homepage, then as opposed to Googling things, trying it out for different use cases. And the other is for a team, I'd suggest that managers give their team half a day and say, automate the crap out of your job. Just think about all of the things that you do and dedicate the time to test what is it good for and what is it not good for. And also switch off that button that makes your data go into the model.
Nick, Andrew, thoughts?
Cool. I'd say, first of all, ChatGPT is lovely and it solves a whole bunch of problems. There's another tool out there which I really like called Perplexity. So perplexity.ai. That integrates with a whole bunch of different things, including ChatGPT. But the thing it's got is it's got access to the internet. So when you ask it a question, it browses the net. It gives you citations of where it found it. It gets over the fact that those models don't have modern, up-to-date data. I use it instead of Google now. It's become my go-to tool. It sits on my phone. It sits on my PC. It's really, really cool. So go and play with perplexity.ai as well as ChatGPT. For something
stick that in the chat for us, Nick.
Just put that in the
yep, I will
on my to-do list.
I shall put that in the chat shortly. Well, I'll stop talking first, then I'll put it in the chat. I can't multitask. I'm a guy.
Go for a walk while you're talking, Nick.
Well, just walk over here and do this. Yeah, I can go do that. But anyway, so Perplexity is really cool. The other thing is get involved in automation. Now, whether you use Power Automate or whether you download my free tool, World of Workflows, there's a bunch of tools out there that allow you to integrate AI into business process automation and start experimenting with things in your business. Automate a tiny process today. Do those 2 things, and I think you're setting yourself up for success in this space. You can then lead your team to do cool stuff.
Love it. Andrew.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like somebody needs to say that, one of the things I'd like to do after this meeting is go read Nick's book, because that sounds fantastic.
Why, thank you.
I think,
or write a book.
I think, that's right. That's right. Go write my own. I think as a Microsoft, team, we sort of have to plug Copilot. I think for all the MSPs out there that interact with Microsoft 365 and are looking to expand that or continue that practice, definitely do some reading about Copilot. I mean, there's more information being provided every day. I think this is going to be something that as MSPs, we really need to be on top of as this starts to come out, because all of a sudden customers are going to have more tools available to them than they have in the past to do some really amazing stuff with. And I think we're going to get an awful lot of questions as an industry about how do we best interact with that and what are the security things. I think other than that, just get in and play with ChatGPT. Really, I think you guys have covered everything. Matt talked about the security aspect. So I think just play with it and see what it can do for you.
Great, guys. That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed that. I've actually taken a whole page of notes of bits and pieces that I'm going to certainly take away, and I know that a few people will as well. So a huge thank you, both from me and everyone on the call. For those of you on the call, this will be recorded, so we will be sending it out. So if you do want to share it around, or if you want to refer back to it, in a couple of days, we'll have that out to you. It'll, like I said earlier, it will be available as a podcast. And finally, if you do want to see any of our previous MSPs in conversation or our up and coming ones, check out hostednetwork.com.au/events, because that's where the recording will also be. Guys, again, finally, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for all of your time today, and everyone for putting aside an hour to listen to us ramble on about AI for an hour. Thanks, guys. We'll leave it there.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Cheers.